get started here. So again, welcome to the ClearAdmit Application Insight event series. This is a special event around essays, and I'm just gonna tell you a little bit about my background and then introduce our really wonderful guests. So I'm the co-founder of ClearAdmit. My name is Graham Richmond. I have an MBA from Wharton and have been working in this space, believe it or not, since 1995. So did a stint in admissions at Wharton, did my MBA there, and then co-founded ClearAdmit, and have been doing that for many, many years now. But enough about me. I really want to get out of the way and allow us to kind of hear from our guests. So let's move on and just introduce everyone. So first up, we have Gina Cicchetti, who's an associate director for master's admissions at Carnegie Mellon's Tepper School of Business. Hey, welcome, Gina.
Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you. Gina's been with us once before, so she's a veteran on these types of events. Let's move on. Now we're going to hear a little bit about, we've got Virginie Fougea, who is the Global Director for Admissions, Financial Aid, and Scholarships for degree programs at INSEAD. So welcome, Virginie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for organizing.
It's our pleasure, as always. And then we've got David Simpson, who is at London Business School, where he's admissions director for the MBA and the Masters in Finance programs. Hi, David.
Hi, Graham. Good to be here. Hello, everybody.
Great to have you. Then we're going to hear as well from John Lee, who's an associate director for MBA admissions at UCLA's Anderson School of Management. Welcome, John.
Welcome, and good morning, good afternoon, good night to you all out there.
Yes, we likely have people from all parts of the world. So some people are probably having their breakfast and others might be already at happy hour or something. So we also have, last but not least, Kate Kreider, who's an associate director of MBA admissions and student recruitment at UNC's Kenan-Flagler School. Welcome, Kate. Oh, Kate might have been.
Thank you. So happy to be here with all of you.
Great. Thanks, Kate.
Hey.
So let's dive in because we have a lot to cover. So we're going to start with a pretty simple question. I just want to get a sense for when you guys read the essays in an application, and if you're willing, how much time do you spend reading an application? And I also wondered, as you think about this question, is it the same for you and everyone on your team? Like, is there some rule, like you must read, the resume first, or, the essays last, whatever it might be. So feel free to comment on that as well, whether there's like a team norm. And we'll start with Gina over at Carnegie Mellon. So when do you kind of read the essays and how much time do you spend?
I pretty much read in the order that my application is set up on the screen. I'll look at the test scores, transcripts. I do review the resume first just to get an idea, but then I look at the essays and kind of go back again to the resume and other aspects of the application. So for me, it's just very simply read in order. And there's probably at this point, maybe 20, 30 minutes per application, kind of just making sure I've covered everything and understand that everything that's being presented to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I just want to remind those who are tuning in, and I apologize if you've joined other sessions, but I want to remind everyone that in most cases, in fact, I think in all cases, your application is read more than once. So before you kind of get nervous about, wow, I spent 40 hours producing this application and it's then read in like 20 or 30 minutes, know that more than one admissions officer will read your file. So we're just talking about one read here. So let's move on. Virginie, how do you do things at INSEAD? When do you read the essays and how much time do you spend per file?
I tend to go back and forth. So I will pick and choose and then cross-check information. So the essays will come probably after having read the profile because this is the first part of the application form. So we have the profile, and then with dates, and that's very basic information, it's facts. But then I go to the essays and I can come back and I swing a lot like this. And I let the team choose. They decide how they want to go and what they read first. And I know that because this is a good thing with your session, Graham, is that I did check with the team. Hey, that's actually a good question. How do you read? And they did mention that the things that were different than mine. I usually take 40 minutes to read everything.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and it's yeah, I guess you call it a profile in the INSEAD application, and I think in some places, like in the US, they call it like a data form, but you're just talking about the basic form people fill out with all the info and stats and things. Okay. David, how about at LBS? How do you guys do it? And I know it says essays, but I think you guys just have one, so apologize that we didn't put a parentheses bracket around that, but how do you guys do it?
So I think we vary individually within a team, but the way we've set up our application is that it flows really nicely in a sensible, logical format. So you could just read cover to cover in the way we have it set up and it'd be perfect. I tend to quickly glance at the resume first and then go back and read it all through because there's a nice flow. So the last thing I read will be the reference or references. How long do I take? This really varies. You can either be sure on someone in 10 minutes or take 40 minutes to an hour or have to come back to it because you can't decide. It probably averages at 20 to 30 minutes, I guess. But as you said, one read and then it's passed on. So you're getting your money's worth in terms of application fee, and we really deliberate long and hard over it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. John, how about at UCLA Anderson? When do you read the essays, and yeah, how much time are you spending on a file?
Yeah, I think I'm going to reiterate a lot of what other people have said. For us, it's really just there is actually, so yes, you do have more than one set of eyes, so don't worry, you definitely get more than 20 minutes after putting hours of together. For us, there are 9 people in the admissions committee, so just think about that. So I'm not saying all 9 will read it, but they definitely will have multiple touch points. And I think we take liberty in reading any way we want in terms of where we begin, where we end. I personally actually choose to do the resume first, and that's just personal preference. I like to get a context and idea of like who this person is, and I feel like the walking me through your resume portion really gives me a good idea of like where this person is right now and where they eventually want to go, which then gives me more context for the rest of the applications. But for the most part, we do toggle back and forth. And like David said, depending on who it is, some people can take 10 minutes because it's a clear, I'll say one way or the other. And then, then there are some who may take a little bit longer because we are toggling back and forth, trying to piece certain stories together. But on average, it would be about anywhere between 20 and 30 minutes per applicant.
Okay, that's helpful. Kate, any thoughts from you about, how you all do it at Kenan-Flagler?
Yeah, absolutely. I know you all spend so much time investing in the process. We want to make sure that we honor that and going through the application and having the multiple reads. So I personally also do the resume first, just so that I can get a glimpse of who you are as an individual and as a candidate, and then go through and read the essays and kind of that demographic information and test scores and that sort of thing. And spend about 30 to 45 minutes per applicant.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I think, one thing that's interesting that I've heard from all of you, I think, is that, the resume sort of looms large as a really great way to just quickly get up to speed, or at least, a data form with the basic, facts and figures and information. And I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes it might be hard to dive right into an essay when you don't have some of that background context and things. So the next thing that I wanted to do is get into kind of the school by school. We're going to go school by school. And for those of you who've joined us before for these events, you know how this works, but we're going to ask each school to talk us through one of their essay questions. And the idea is that, you want to sort of walk us through how you came up with the idea to ask this question, as well as, whether or not the question sort of reflects your program's values and and how the response, tells you, critical information about the candidate. And then obviously, and perhaps most importantly, if you have any advice for people writing the essay that you're talking about, what would that advice be as someone sets out to, begin putting pen to paper, or well, virtual pen to paper, I guess. So we're going to start with Gina at Carnegie Mellon Tepper. And yeah, just talk us through, one of your essays, and let us know. I mean, I think we have them all on slides here, so we can bounce around if there's one that you want to speak to specifically.
Yeah, thank you. So this is our main essay for our personal statements, or your personal statement. And, tell us how you overcome adversity during your journey. What did you learn about yourself, and how has that shaped who you are? We wanted to get to know you more on a personal level, because reviewing the application will hit the data points. We'll see your resume and the career you've had, but we wanted to get to know you a little bit better, and what has maybe shaped you in your life. So, we've realized that each student at Tepper has a unique story that just really adds value to the class, and also supports the Tepper values of being supportive and inclusive. When we're evaluating the application, we're not comparing stories. Again, I think, it's about your journey. So, we're just looking at what you're willing to share with us and the committee, and more about yourselves. It's okay to be vulnerable and put yourself out there, and just share a part of yourself. So, again, think about maybe a challenge you've had. How did you overcome that? Who maybe helped you along the way on this journey? And so my advice would be, be yourself, be authentic. There is no magic Tepper formula for what we're looking for in applicants. And so don't write what you think we want to hear. Again, it's about you overcoming adversity, a challenge, and how has that shaped you? That's your journey. So be authentic.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I do want to ask you, as kind of a follow-up, about a question you have in your application form, which is, and I might get this wrong, but I feel like you ask, I'm not going to get the phrasing right, but you basically ask people for, their goals, right? So you say, like, what's your post-MBA goal? And then you ask for a plan B. Like, what are they going to do if that doesn't work out? And I think this is a great question. I just wanted to know, like, where does it come from? Why do you ask it? And then I was curious, and this is just because I used to work in admissions, but I was curious, like, did the career services people have any role in this question? Like, do they work with admissions at all and say, hey, if you bring people to campus, make sure they have a plan A and a plan B or something? But yeah, where did this come from?
Yeah, it came about a while ago, and just that, talking to career services as well. And I think it's important for our students. We obviously want you to have your goal. We want you to have a target for a career, a position, but we also want you to be open-minded, because part of going back to school is exploring the classes, the options, maybe joining a professional club that you may not have really thought about, but the more you learn about where that direction can take you, we just want you to have our students to have an open mind and explore the different options available to them. So while, yes, you're working with your career advisor on, your target employment post MBA, but maybe you have this other interest as well based on some other classes that you've taken, or you're going back and forth really between which direction you want to go. So you might be recruiting for a couple different positions. So that's all it's about, just kind of being open-minded and wanting to explore the opportunity for coming back to get your MBA.
Yeah, that makes sense. What I was going to say earlier as well is that I feel like a really high percentage of candidates, go off to business school with one set of goals, and then invariably over the course of their MBA, they may change plans. And so it seems like this is actually a good exercise for people to kind of get involved with and sort of mapping this out, because you need to be nimble. And as you say, you might find something in business school that sort of steers you in a slightly different direction. So I think it's a great question, and I'm glad that you were able to, sort of walk us through where it comes from. Let's move on. I wanted to move to Virginie at INSEAD, and hear, whichever essay you want to walk us through. We have them all on screen here, so just let us know. And yeah, I'd love to hear again where the essay question came from, what you're looking for, and any advice you have for candidates who are going to write it.
We can stay on this one because this one is a great one for me. I like it. It's a little bit like Gina explained. It's about you. It's about the personality, and this one has been with us for a while now. So it's probably one that will stay because it gives applicants an understanding that what matters for us is really the personality, your value set, your passion, your hobbies, your interest, and for that reason, this essay is wide enough to enable people to put anything that is important to them into one essay. And really, one word also that I like is the candid word, because it's again coming back to authenticity, for which you can be yourself. And if there are grammatical mistakes in the essays, we all have an accent at INSEAD. I do. We have more than, it's only 20% of the class that will have English as their native language. So it's from the essays. If we read the insightful essays and stories, even if there are mistakes, grammatical mistakes, it's fine. So and we want really things that are not just a canned answer that could be written to any business school and sent widely and copy paste. This is not the purpose of the essays, and I think this one enables applicants to do that.
So I know that you mentioned the word candid here and this desire to really be authentic. And I wondered, do you think it's a good idea for someone writing this essay to maybe just ask peers, family, friends to help them think through, what are the personal characteristics that I have, or what, how would you describe me to someone? Would that be a good exercise for someone to engage in as they start to think about this essay?
Yeah, that's always a fine line. People do ask us this. Yes, it's good to kind of brainstorm with people. Having them really read the essay and check everything is probably more dangerous, because at the end of the day, it could be something that is lacking authenticity, to come back to this, and could be something that, well, I mean, could have been written by somebody else than yourself. So it's important to bounce back ideas. Close friends are good, or family, because then they can tell you, but this is not who you are, and this is not how I see you. So then that is enriching. But apart from this, I would stop there. Having people read essays when they are in the final form, ready to send, I would say it's not so important. It's not so interesting.
Okay, good advice. I did want to ask you another question about, you have an accomplishment and kind of failure essay, which maybe we can get up on screen here. I think it might be the second one, but yeah, here we go. So it's the achievement one, and then a situation where you failed. It's essay 2 on your screen. It's only 400 words long, and I wondered, do you find that candidates tend to devote more of those words to the success or the accomplishment than they do to the failure? And do you have a recommendation, how people might sort of split this up?
That's a good question. I have not seen any trends of people just going about their successes and achievements. I think people usually overlap, because it's always you learn through your mistakes and your failures. So it's always sometimes going both directions, and then that's how people use it. It's usually both going in both directions. I like the essay number 3 as well, because of the fact that it's really again not just all about work. It's also, what else do you have interest in? What else do you like to do? because this is who you are. We have the work part taken care of with the videos, with the interviews. So the essays is more about the person and who you are.
Okay, I think that's good advice. And I do think that this is like an area that I feel like a lot of applicants underestimate, this sort of third piece of the profile, whether it's, if you think of the first two pieces as being your academic strengths or experience, and then the second being your professional, this third bit about like who you are and what you do for, in your spare time and all these other things are really important. But let's move on and give some time to David at LBS. David, do you want to walk us through? So you have only one essay. So I guess it's going to be, you're going to talk about this one, I presume. But yeah, take us through it. Where did it come from? And yeah, what are you looking for when you read it? And what advice do you have to someone who's going to set out to write it?
So we went down to one essay, I guess, during the sort of 2010s when there was quite a large essay rationalization across especially US schools. And we just thought we can get what we need from this essay. How do we decide? Well, we work very closely with the Career Center, and MBAs are about your career and where you hope to go. So it is very practical. It's very direct. It's very functional. I think it's probably quite a good description of me, perhaps, in that way. But we've got different parts of the application to measure different things, is a way I'd say. So this is really an opportunity for someone to talk about their journey, their past, their future, and how the MBA, specifically our MBA, can link up these pieces. And so what it does, it helps to show the understanding of who we are and what we do, and also sees if they can understand their own career success and limitations so far as well. And then there's the very practical element of forming a view on whether they have a realistic and yet ambitious view of their future. So we are very aware it's, this is an essay at a point in time. It's not a contract. So once you start on day one, you could change your career track, 5 times, or within the first week when you're going to different company presentations, that's absolutely fine. But to have an initial sense of direction, or telling us that you're not quite sure yet, but here's what you're thinking, that's fine. Most of the purpose of an essay is to provide conversation later. Once you've made a decision based mainly on their profile, I believe that's what we're all doing, and then the essays provide conversation pieces with the rest of the application and those data forms you describe, building up to that all-important interview. So it has a functional job to give us more information than is available in a resume, and also gives the opportunity for a bit of creativity in there as well, but it depends on how each candidate approaches it.
Okay, so one follow-up that I wanted to ask, and it's sort of well, there's 2 things here, I guess. The first is this essay has this bit about London Business School's program contributing towards the candidate's post-MBA goals. But to what extent and where do you get information about how the candidate might contribute to the London Business School experience? Like how, because a lot of schools ask that kind of thing and it's not really here. But I'm assuming that I know that you have these other pieces like the interview as you described, but do you want to just speak to that aspect?
Yeah, sure. So I think most candidates will find a way, well, they'll recognize that their contributions to us and well, to their classmates are what makes a school strong. We had the essay in, we decided that it was very well answered during the interview or in other places. And actually there is the second essay, the optional essay. So yes, only one is compulsory, but maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. But that second essay is an opportunity to tell us how you might contribute, or it might be for lots of different purposes. So yeah, we find different ways through the application, but mainly at interview, I would say, in terms of their potential contributions. We will form our own view from their professional background and maybe their hobbies and interests, how they might contribute. But then it definitely provides that really good talking point later.
Okay. Yeah. And so just on the optional essay, I did want to ask, because you have said before that, you guys get what you need from this first essay, right? And so then there is the optional essay. And so I then wondered, like, well, should applicants think long and hard before they submit an optional essay? And how should they use that space?
Oh, you're overthinking it there. perhaps like our candidates do. So I need to answer this one and sort of put that claim to bed. No, the optional essay really is there for you to talk about something that you love or don't love about your profile. So if your undergrad grades were, they were fine but not outstanding, you can talk about that a bit more here. Although we do ask that earlier, so bad example, Simpson. It really is a chance for you to tell us what's important. There's no traps, okay? So you're not downgraded if you don't use it. I would kind of question why you missed the opportunity though, because it's we ask for you to squeeze everything into this one essay, and people often think, how can I get it all in there? We don't. You have that choice of the second, but you're not downgraded for not using it. I would judge you by what you put in and what you think is relevant though. If you're telling me a bunch of things that really either you've repeated elsewhere in the application or I don't really need to know, then that might be a question. It's not going to be something that gets you cut unless you put something totally crazy in there. Yeah, we see it as an opportunity, but not a compulsory one. And then it's up to interpretation. And here's the thing, one thing we say is we're not going to help you to understand what we want from it more than this kind of conversation I'm giving away now, because we want you to interpret it. What do you think we want to see in an optional question? But that all sounds quite devious, doesn't it? And quite academic, but it isn't. It's just an optional essay.
Yeah, and I do like the way that you've described. You can write about something that you love about your candidacy or something that you're, maybe less satisfied with, which could be, maybe you couldn't get a recommendation from a current supervisor, or maybe you guys asked that separately. I don't know, because you do have some of those side questions, but it does seem like it's a great opportunity to certainly to sort of highlight something that maybe didn't fit into that first essay that you really love about your background. So thanks for shedding light. And my job is to try to think like the applicants. So yeah, maybe I'm overthinking, but applicants are known to do that too. So yeah, let's go over to John at UCLA. John, do you want to walk us through, something about one of your essays, and yeah, just any insight on where it came from, what you look for, and yeah, advice to someone who's going to write.
Yeah, I actually can talk about that a little bit because it's more near and dear and personal to me. So we actually only went to one essay this year, and we actually started that last year. So last year we went to one essay, and we're sticking to just one essay just because in previous years when we had a second essay, the main essay was the what is your short-term, long-term goals essay. And we really saw that because there was a word count for that one, we felt like applicants really felt like they have to hit this word count when we really were just looking for something simple, right? My short-term goal is to go into product management. My long-term goal is to become chief marketing officer. That's all we really wanted. But then we started seeing all this, well, back in high school, or they started putting this narrative together about what was happening within industry. And it was just a lot of noise. So we switched it last year to, we just really want, you have 50 characters to kind of answer this one prompt in terms of short-term, long-term goals. So we decided that the main essay really would just be one, and it gives you we chose this prompt because it gives you a chance to really understand you as a person. And the reason where this came about was it was something I was thinking about, and I suggested it to my team just because 2 years ago when we did this, so we didn't change it from last year. This is pretty much the same essay question because we liked it so much. And it really gave us a chance to really get to know someone in a deeper level, right? Because if you think about what happened in the past year or two, there was just a lot that really forces an applicant to think introspectively, to really understand what is happening in the world and how they want to create that change. And driving change is one of UCLA Anderson's tenets, right? There's also share success and think fearlessly. So that worked out that way, right? So we were able to see how applicants really think about who they are and what they want to change within the world. It also helps to build community too, right? We want to know how this is what happened, what was the situation, what made you think about it that way, and what do you plan to do about it, and how will you bring it to the Anderson community, right? Just because we are a really student-led community as well, so we want to make sure that if you're going to come in, you're going to fit into that fabric really nicely and fit into that fold and really be a part of it, and then also just being a part of an inclusive environment. So when we think about the essay, we think about how something, take an event, and it doesn't have to be global, it could be micro as well. But what was it that what was it that happened? Why did this happen? And what did you do to change it? And how you're going to take that change and affect your community or your career. So, or even both. I think at this point it says career, community, both. But you don't have to feel like you have to tie it into two. You can definitely just choose one or the other.
Yeah, this is a really interesting question, and it's somewhat unusual, right? I mean, this is not the kind of question that all schools would ask. And I did wonder, and I think you've kind of touched on this just now, but I want to kind of underline it, or if you can underline it for us. This essay question, I mean, for me, when I look at it, I'm instantly thinking of, okay, the pandemic, issues around social justice or climate change, or these big things that have been happening. And so I just want to make sure that candidates know that it sounds to me like you could write about something, like you said, very micro, like, I don't know, the passing of a close relative, or I don't know, experience working with like a mentor that really shaped your view of the world, or exposed you to a promising sector or something. So it sounds like everything's on the table, right? Because I don't want candidates to overthink this and feel like, oh no, I have to talk about one of these big things that is happening in the world, because if I'm not, it looks like I have my head in the sand or something.
Yeah, no, anything is in the table, it's on the table. So you do not have to, most applicants, I will say, obviously chose something macro just because it was something that was out there prevalent and relatable to them. But we've also seen ones where people talked about, they took a macro situation and actually built it into a micro situation and turned that into a community and career prompt, right? So we've seen it all before. So we've seen in the example of the macro to the micro sense, we've seen how COVID obviously affected all these industries, right? But it even affected small businesses more. So we saw a lot of family business applicants really talk about how they had to really change the way they did business, or really pivot in a way to still survive, right? So that was super interesting in that sense. So you weren't really talking about COVID, like COVID, yeah, sure, that was the big thing that happened, but you really talked about your business, your family business, and how you fought to keep that surviving during this time.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. One other question I have for you is that, your optional essay, it asks for information about extenuating circumstances in a candidate's background. And as we were discussing with David, like that can sometimes mean, you don't have a rec from a current supervisor, or maybe you're explaining a GPA issue, or something, a gap in employment. But what about, like, could someone use that space to talk about, I don't know, their socioeconomic background and how that may have put obstacles along their path to school or to a career, et cetera? Is that fair game for this essay?
Yeah, that's definitely fair game. I think, and that's a great point that you brought up. I think from the ad comms perspective, we don't know what we don't know, right? So if you don't explain that to us, we won't really have that context. I think in terms of people on my team, I have a better lay of the land in terms of that context. My background actually is in education, so I do understand, I do understand how certain parts of someone's life may affect their trajectory, right? So I kind of get it, but not everyone will. So that's definitely fair game. The only thing I will say that is not fair game is, a lot of the schools here have really great essay prompts, and you're probably going to apply to some other schools here. And I will say, do not, even if you know that you knocked an essay out of the park for another school, please, please, please do not use that as an optional essay. We really don't care, like, in the end of the day, about about another school's essay, even if you thought it was so great that you want us to read it.
John, I'm really glad that you're talking about that, because I think there is that temptation. You write an essay for a school, you're enamored with how great it came out, and then you look for ways to sort of shoehorn it in to another school's prompt or to an optional essay. And I think for those tuning in, like, I think it's important to know that the folks on this panel, when we're doing events in person and things, they're having dinner together after these types of events, and they all know what essay questions they ask, right? And so everyone, they're aware when you're using a question from another school, and they can even spot it when you kind of modify it slightly. They still are going to know that you're trying to fit something in. So definitely give each school the time that they merit as you go through this process, and don't try to take those kinds of shortcuts, because they can come back to haunt you. But John, thanks for those insights. Let's go over to Kate and hear a little bit about UNC Kenan-Flagler. Again, we'd love to know, just shed some light on an essay question that you all ask, and where it comes from, and what you're looking for as you review, and any advice you have for someone who's writing it.
Yeah, I'm hoping to talk a little bit more about essay too, if
Yeah, we
we
can.
could go
There you go.
to the next slide. So we last year asked a question around equity and inclusion, and wanted to continue being forward and thinking about that sense of belonging. That's a value of ours and a value of inclusion. We've added a core course for inclusive leaders. So we wanted to continue this theme and push the envelope when we think about equity and inclusion. And so really talking about, how you have contributed to your community and learning about others, how you've had conversations of difference and maybe conflict, how you've thought about diverse perspectives and life experiences and how that applies to your candidacy. And so I'm thinking about being authentic to yourself, authentic and vulnerable, and really looking for that open-mindedness that you going to meet conflict with people in your classes and in business. And so really thinking about how you engage in that and have that open-mindedness, people orientation part of that. I think really, again, you've heard from a lot of folks today, but please just answer the question. A really simple piece of advice. A lot of times people don't answer the question. And so it may seem silly, but go back, really look at your essays and ask yourself, or give it to someone else who doesn't know the prompt, and then have them read through it. You did answer the question.
That's good advice. Yeah, this is an interesting question. I know that it's new for this year, and that you guys have had I feel like there's been a trend where last year had that really unique question. I think it was about COVID, if memory serves. And so very interesting. I guess since you've described this one really well, I wanted to ask a question about the first essay. So we can go back a slide just so people can see that essay on screen. Just like we talked about with Tepper earlier, you have this kind of, what are your immediate career goals? And then you also have a kind of backup plan question. And I wondered, again, like, where does that come from? And I also was curious to know about the longer term. So, a lot of schools will ask for not only an immediate career goal post MBA, but also like, what's your, long-term goal for your career? And that's not really here. And I wondered, is that something you want to hear about, or just like if you could just comment on where that angle is coming from too, that would be really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important for us to see that you have that initial direction, that an MBA is a good fit for you at this time. And I think, I've changed careers several times. Sometimes I still don't know what I want to do in life, right? And so having that backup plan, understanding when you don't get those interviews, or if consulting is your dream and it just doesn't happen, right? Like, what is your backup plan, and do you have that grit and resilience to kind of get through that, and being open to those option A, B, C, and D, right? But also understanding that with option C, you might find your true passion with a new club that you've explored, or a global opportunity that you've had. And so just really be willing to explore how your career could pan out. And I think for the long term, that's probably more for our career coaches and our office to kind of get you kind of set up on that trajectory, and really just kind of looking kind of at the beginning of your journey of what those immediate career goals are, and don't fire, what would you do?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess it keeps it pretty straightforward in that, the candidate can focus on what are they going to do right after they graduate, and what's the plan B as well. And yeah, I agree. I know I said it before, but people change their minds quite a bit in business school. And just so everyone knows, it's not like when you walk across the stage to graduate, the dean holds up the essay and says, wait a second, you just took a job in consulting, but your essay was about, banking or whatever. Like, that's not going to happen. So keep that in mind, everyone. So let's move on. We've got another sort of portion of the session that we'll zip through here. And then again, don't forget, each school is going to stick around and open up a private breakout room in Zoom that you all can jump into and ask your questions. What we're going to do for this lightning round, though, is we have some fun questions that we're just going to zip through, and we're going to actually stay with you, Kate. We'll just go back the other way, since I don't want to, I know we always have, alphabetical, everything's alphabetical with the schools, and so we'll give you a chance to go first this time. So describe the UNC Kenan-Flagler MBA student community in 3 words.
So I would say relationships, service, and resilience.
Okay, excellent. Now we're going to go to John. How about UCLA? What are the 3 words that you would use to describe your student community?
Yeah, I would say they are friendly, collaborative, and driven.
Okay, excellent. David, how about you?
I'm going to go for global, eclectic, and interested.
Okay. Virginie, how about at INSEAD?
I would go with impactful, stimulating, stimulated or stimulating, and engaged.
Okay, excellent. And Gina, how about at Tepper?
I'll go with unique, supportive, and I'll go with understanding, since a lot of the other adjectives were stolen as well.
Yes, and actually, I mean, just full disclosure with these lightning rounds, you can, reuse stuff that you hear that you like. It doesn't have to be, everyone doesn't have to give totally unique answers. Let's stay with you, Gina, for our second lightning round question. And this one is, we've talked a lot about essays today, but I always want to hear if there's some other advice that you have for people interested, in this case, in Tepper. Something that's not essay related that you would advise someone to think about as they consider your program and work through the application.
I would just say reach out to current students and alums, because the more you know about the program, the more you can begin to see yourself there. And I think it does come through when you're pulling the entire application together.
Great advice. How about Virginie, what would you say if you had one piece of non-essay advice for those considering and applying to INSEAD?
I would say people are taking us on their story. They're telling us their story. They are sharing information with us, and that is taking us to the journey of their life. And if this is inconsistent, or if there are gaps, or if this is not necessarily matching what the videos is saying and the essays are saying something else, and in the interviews we depict another type of personality, then that's starting to be a little bit worrying for us, or in questioning. So having this consistent story is important.
Okay, yeah, that's excellent advice. And I think we've talked about this maybe in the past, but I feel like it relates to the idea that you don't want the admissions reader to have to play detective or like piece together parts of, the file. I mean, you talked earlier about how you go back and forth, you look at the essays, you might look back at the resume, and ideally everything's kind of lining up and you're not saying, wait a second, this doesn't make sense given what they said in the essay versus what it says on the resume. And it sounds like you're adding in, that the interview, everything should be consistent and you don't want to have question marks that you're leaving the reader with. So let's ask David now too at LBS. What about a piece of non-essay advice?
What am I going to say? So I would say write it as a reader or tell it as a reader. So think of your audience before, whether it's essays, the rest of your application, or the interview. Who is your audience? What do they want to hear? And what do they know already? So they're not going to be technical specialists in whatever you do. So make sure you're translating, so that we can understand it. So yeah, it's just to think of your audience, and remember, we're human beings who are positive about the way we do our job. We're not looking for ways to reject you. We want to hear your story and make sense of it. So make it easier for us. So yeah, write it as a reader.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's great advice as well. Like understanding, I mean, it's kind of marketing 101, right? Know your audience. We always talk about that. Yeah. And I we talk a lot about certain fields, or it seems like, there's, whether it's military or certain tech fields, they're rife with like jargon. And I think sometimes candidates who live and breathe that stuff every day forget that the reader on the other end, is reading to admit like they want to accept you. But if they don't understand what you're talking about because you're, too deep into the cryptocurrency jargon or the military acronyms or whatever, then that creates a hurdle. So great advice, David. Let's move on. John, what about a piece of non-essay advice for those applying to UCLA?
Yeah, I would say it goes back to the jargon that you mentioned. And I would say for the most part, and this is not just UCLA Anderson advice, this is basically any MBA program advice, is that if your resume really should be easy for us to read and digestible. We're generalists for the most part. I think a lot of us are generalists. So we don't understand engineering and military and investment banking too much. So if you start adding all that, it just gets lost, and we have a hard time figuring out. So make sure that your resume really highlights 3 things, because you are applying to business school. That it highlights career progression. So you're showing us like how you've kind of moved up the ranks within your company or within different industries if you have multiple jobs. Career impact. We want to see that you have impact your job in a certain way, whether it was increasing revenues or sale targets, or you made something a little more efficient. And then also transferable skills, because in the end of the day, that's what you're looking to make mostly a functional, if not functional, and industry pivot. So as long as you show career progression, career impact, and transferable skills, you're good to go.
Yeah, great advice. I think it's interesting. I always tell people, write your materials or assemble your materials, assuming that the person reading it is like, your high school English literature teacher. And, they're really smart, but they're not someone who's necessarily well-versed in your field. So just know that, there's a bit of a learning curve, and you have to, just speak in a language that they're going to be able to follow and not get lost in the jargon, as you say. Let's move on. Kate, what about a piece of advice for those applying to UNC? Again, non-essay advice.
Yeah, so I would go a little higher level. This is really a journey that you're on, thinking about your career projection and kind of the impact you want to make in the world. And so I think really engage in some self-reflection and really clear on your why. Why are you going back to business school? What is the impact that you want to make, and where does that come from? I think that self-reflection will be really well throughout the application process and whatever school.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, we always talk about on the Clear podcast and stuff, we talk a lot about taking a sort of personal inventory and knowing like what have you done to date, where are you headed, and why do you need this? And I think to some extent there are environments where people are working where they look to their right, they look to their left, and people have gone off to business school. And so they just sort of assume that's what they have to do. But I think it really does make sense to step back and reflect. I want to stay with you, Kate, and ask you a final lightning round question. And it's actually in honor of both Tepper and UNC's kind of Plan B questions. And so my question to you is, what would you be doing if you weren't working in MBA admissions?
If money or nothing were a factor, I would be throwing ceramics or making pottery all day long.
Excellent. All right. Cool. Yeah, we're going to find out about everyone's like hidden talents and interests with this question. So John, how about you? What would you be doing if you weren't in admissions?
I think practically, if I was to think about a skill set that would actually make sense, is we would probably be like FBI analysts, because we are really good at piecing information together and finding out things about people. And that's pretty much what all adcoms really do, is just kind of look through your entire profile like that. But if it was more of a passion project, I would probably be owning a coffee shop, like something very similar to Central Perk from Friends, where your same community just comes and sits and has coffee all day. So that would be like my dream. It's still my dream, I think, to be honest.
Excellent. Well, maybe Anderson will, you can get an MBA and learn how to kind of set up a business. And all right. So David, what would you be doing if you weren't working in admissions?
I didn't know whether you wanted to be super practical about this or completely ridiculous. So on the super practical, I might work for our advancement team and try and help raise more scholarships, because they're great. But to liven it up a bit, I don't know, maybe I'd be a musician in a band with you, Graham.
Yeah, I figured there might be some music in there somewhere. All right, so Virginie, what would you be doing if you weren't working in admissions?
Well, actually, I would be taking care of animals, whether it's being a vet or I'm a countryside person, so I love being surrounded by animals when I'm not surrounded by students.
Got
And the comparison stopped there.
it. Excellent. Gina, how about you? What would you be doing if you weren't working in admissions?
Well, I grew up a competitive figure skater, so I'd definitely be coaching full time. Right now, it's more on the part-time side, so I'd be doing that while I probably figure something out more practical, maybe an office job, but probably not. I'd stick with
Yeah.
coaching.
Excellent. Well, I wish it was the Winter Olympics right now. It's summer,
know.
but you know. So I want to thank you guys for, obviously spending so much time with us today and walking us through all these ins and outs of your applications. And obviously, just it's so great to get a diverse group of schools together like this. And as I said earlier, we covered the entire globe with the panel today. So what we're going to do now is let all of our panelists run along to their individual breakout Zooms. And if you're an attendee, just stick around. I'm going to say a few more things as we let them get set up. But I really did want to thank Gina, Kate, John, David, Virginie for all your time today. It's been really wonderful to chat with you. We'll let you guys get set up, but thank you so much. So for the attendees who are going to stick around here just for a minute or two, we just want to let the schools get settled into Zoom before you all show up with your questions. And the way that this is going to work is we're going to send out via email and via the chat here. We're going to post links to a Zoom breakout room for each and every school. For those of you who are not like Zoom experts, you can only do one at a time. But many of our attendees have historically jumped into one, asked a question, and then moved on to another. So you can attend multiple, just not at the same time. And in the meantime, I just wanted to give you guys some tips because it was really interesting. I think it was Gina who mentioned that, one of the things she would recommend that's not necessarily an essay tip is that you spend time getting to know the MBA programs that you're considering. And I think, obviously that's the pandemic has created new challenges in that domain, but also I think it's presented us with a lot of opportunities as well. So while you can't go to campus, and we didn't talk about it today, but I believe all the schools attending are not really running campus visit programs just yet, even if they are having plans for in-person class and everything for the students, we still can't run to these campuses and visit. And so what I would suggest you do is, as a starting point, look for formal student ambassador programs. Almost every school will allow you to go onto their website and literally leave your information and connect with a current student who can answer your questions and just provide you with all kinds of color and context around the MBA experience so that when you write an essay or you go to an interview, the light bulb goes off and you can actually draw on some of that stuff. So I would do that as a starting point. I would also reach out to the leaders of student organizations, that align with your interests and goals. So if you're, someone who's really interested in fintech or, renewable energy or healthcare, like connect with the heads of those clubs, talk to the students, get information, again, to help color your interviews, essays, and any interactions you then have with the school. It'll give you a clearer picture. And frankly, I mean, between me and all of you, it might, help you understand that like, oh, this program is absolutely perfect for me, or it's not. You might find out that like, you're not happy with the level of activity in a given club or something. So do that kind of research, really important. Obviously schools, most of them host their own podcasts, they're on social media. So if you're applying to 5 or 10 schools or however many it is, start following these programs on your social, whether it's Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever you go. That can give you tidbits and just insights into the student community and what's happening that, again, will make you look smart and connected when it comes time to write essays or go to an interview. The last thing is schools have really upped their game with these virtual campus tours. A lot of them are using, pretty excellent third-party kind of software that's out there now that allows you to get a pretty good immersive experience on their campus virtually, right? So check that stuff out too. And again, I did want to thank all of you for joining us today. I know that, you've all taken time out of your day to listen in. The schools offered a lot of terrific advice, so I'm sure that you're all happy to have attended, and as you set out to write your essays. We're going to get the links out there. I don't know if they've already been posted in the chat, but you should get links here to the different breakout rooms so that you can all head off. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining. And obviously, check out clearadmit.com. Stay tuned to what we're up to. There will be more events coming. And obviously, you can tune into our weekly podcast that we run. We run Admissions Director Q&A podcast. There's a lot out there for you to check out. So thanks so much for joining us, and we hope to see you all again really soon.